Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad. If this is your first time tuning in here, then this is a little bit different than what we normally do. Typically, we're bringing on guests and we're focusing our attention on their stories and learnings and things that they can teach us from their time and travels abroad. But in this case, we are actually turning it around and focusing on you all, the audience. For the last few weeks, I've been gathering questions from you all, and we've picked out our favorite questions, or the ones that we think are the most pertinent to the rest of you in the audience, some of the themes and trends that popped up throughout there. And we're going to answer them live on the show today. So if this is your first time tuning in, it's a little different than what we normally do. Maybe go back through some of the other episodes and get a feel for what we've been doing here. And for the rest of you, you'll notice this is a little bit different. But hey, you've been around for a while and you may have heard some of our other Q&A episodes. So hope you all enjoy this. Before we dive in, I want to give a quick update, a little announcement. I have been doing About Abroad now for over 170 weeks straight. I think we've released an episode every week since then. A few times we've had to insert some past episodes as a filler when cancellations happened or whatnot. But for the most part, we've produced a new episode every single week for about 2.5 years. And I think it's a good time to take a little break. So I'm going to actually be spending the summer traveling. Going to go back home to the US for about a month. I'm going to spend a month traveling around Europe and maybe take a little downtime and just relax and reflect and disconnect from work. And with that comes disconnecting from the podcast. So as sad as I am to say goodbye for a little while, it's see you later. Hasta luego. We'll return back to the show at the end of the summer, but we'll take a little pause. And in the meantime, I do plan to occasionally release an episode, one of our greatest hits episodes throughout the summer. So stick around. There will still be a little bit of content coming your way, but we'll take a break from new episodes for a few months. So there's a couple things I want to ask you to do really quick, because the worst thing that could happen here is that we forget about each other, right? So please take a moment right now to subscribe to the podcast. That way you will get an update when I come back with new episodes. And the second thing you can do is in the show notes, you'll see there is a link to our newsletter. Once we start releasing new episodes again, we will send out an email to that newsletter, and then you'll be prompted to tune back into About Abroad. So if you've enjoyed the show so far, do those two things for me really quick. And with that said, let's dive into the questions. So first question of the day is from Sarah in Toronto. She said, I've heard you talk about your European permanent residency, but I'm not really sure what this means or how you got it. Did you marry an EU citizen? Do you have citizenship, or is residency different? Basically, I just want to know the full story behind what you have visa-wise and how you went about getting it. So, okay, yeah, that's a great question, Sarah. I think I've talked about this some in little spurts here and there during conversations with guests, but I probably have never sat down and said okay, here's the whole story behind how I got to, as an American citizen, got to a place where I have European Union permanent residency. And then sort of how that differs from temporary residency or citizenship. So for those of you that are interested in this, I think it's very important to kind of know some of those, because I certainly didn't know these things when I first started exploring moving abroad for any period of time. Just all those words meant the exact same thing to me. So yeah, hopefully this can be helpful. So the first thing is, for anybody not familiar, if you're interested in moving to Europe, generally speaking, if you're living outside of Europe, you have you can typically only go for 90 days on a tourist visa. And then after those 90 days are up, you have to leave for 90 days before you can come back in. So it's pretty difficult to think about how do you skip from that to becoming a permanent resident. So the first step on that path is securing temporary residency. So that's what I started out with. I went through Spain, and each country within the Schengen zone in Europe is going to have their own set of rules, but they're all somewhat similar in that they usually have some path that will allow you to come stay beyond 90 days if you check all the right boxes or fulfill the requirements or whatever. So in my case, I went through Spain and something called the non-lucrative visa. This was back in 2018. My wife and I decided, hey, by the way, to answer part of your question, Sarah, no, I didn't marry a EU citizen. My wife is also American. So we decided this together back in 2017. We're going to apply for a visa in Europe, and we're going to figure out which one meets our requirements the best. At the time, that was called the non-lucrative visa. It still is. It still exists. The rules are all pretty much the same, but the circumstances have changed around that. So a non-lucrative visa basically says you're not making any money. You're not going to be able to work in Spain. So you better figure out some way to be able to support yourself. The way it was designed was for retirees, pensioners who had a fixed income, because prior to remote work, if you were physically in a place, the only way you would have an income coming from somewhere else would likely be from your retirement fund. But of course, these days we have remote work. It's just that back in 2017, when I was applying for this, remote work was not really on the radar of the government. So though the visa was designed for retirees, it applied to my situation because I had an income coming in from another source, from another country. So I could come live in Spain and not take someone's job. So with that, they gave me temporary residency, and temporary residency gives you essentially just 1 year. You get 1 year to kind of like figure your life out. And it's a little bit of a stressful year, but it's totally possible. And so during that 1 year time, you're figuring everything out. You're trying to, establish a permanent home and get your bills set up and get a bank account and get your residency permit all finalized and all of that. And then at the end of that year, if you decide you want to stay, you can renew it 2 more times in 2-year increments. So I renewed it once, which got me to the end of 3 years. And then I renewed it a second time, which got me to the end of 5 years. And it was at this point that I started engaging with Lexity, who is one of our sponsors. They've been a sponsor of the show for quite a long time. So huge shout out to Lexity, because I tried to do this on my own the first time, and I started to try to do it on my own the second time, and figured out that I still didn't understand the system. I beat my head against the wall for like 6 months trying to figure this thing out. Even though the information was there and the consulates were working with me, it was just too hard to do on my own. So one of my, if you're new to the show, then you haven't heard me say this before. If you have been here for a long time, then one of my biggest pieces of advice is like hire a professional that knows how to navigate this space, because you are not a professional, and it is so relatively inexpensive to just get someone who can walk you right through the process, knows how to grease the wheels, all of that stuff. So during that renewal process, that's when I started working with Lexity. And they've been phenomenal. Like I work with David, who's based there in Spain. He walks me through everything in English. We never have to meet in person. We do it all digitally, all that stuff. So, little shout out for Lexity in the middle of this, because it is super important to make sure that you hire a professional and get someone to help you with this. So that said, they helped me get what was called EU permanent residency, because after 5 years of temporary residency, you get to choose. You get to go down one of two paths. You can go a very easy path where you just get, like in my case, it would have been Spanish permanent residency. Or I could go another way where I got European Union permanent residency. And I decided to go that route because that route gave me the opportunity to move to another country if I wanted to. It gave me the opportunity to work in other countries if that ever became an opportunity. So I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to do that. It's a little bit more challenging, but with Lexity's help, I was able to get that done. And now my wife and I have what's called permanent residency in the EU. It essentially means for 5 years we can live anywhere that we want in Europe, and we can work in Europe, and we can re-register in any country, just going through the different countries' rules to do that. So this is one step below citizenship, because citizenship means you have a passport and means you can vote. But aside from that, it's for all intents and purposes kind of the same thing. I do have to renew it again at the end of 5 years, but once I hit that mark, it will be a 10-year renewal. And it's not really like you apply to renew. It's more like you just go and fill out the paperwork. It's like getting a driver's license renewed or something. You just have to go through the process to do it. You don't have to take the exam again, sort of like that. So yeah, that's the condensed version of a 6-7 year odyssey. But for me, it's been totally well worth it. And, again, like with the help of a professional, it's not so challenging to navigate. The big thing is you really just need to be able to support yourself financially in the beginning. So if you can prove that you have savings, if you can prove that you have an income coming in from a remote job or something like that, then most of these visa options are available to you. We've got some other questions down the way that we'll get to that touch on some other options, but that shares my story up to this point. So thank you, Sarah. I hope that answers your question. Follow up with me if you need any more details. And of course, the link to Lexity with a 10% off discount will be in the show notes. So you can follow up with them if you're interested in pursuing the same path and need some professional assistance that I won't be able to provide. Moving on to, this was a fun one. So this is from Kim in California. She said, can you give your senior superlatives, in quotations, to every country you've been to? And she provides a few category ideas that we ended up just using all of them for that she provided. So I'll share about this in a second. I don't know if senior superlatives are a thing in other countries. I should have asked around, but I loved this question, Kim. It was super creative and a little bit different than what we normally get into. So I'm not going to go through every country I've ever been to. That might take a little while, but I'm going to go through. What I did was I took your categories and I matched them up with the countries that I've been to in the last 12 months. And then so for those of you that are unfamiliar with senior superlatives, this is a thing we do in the US where like at the end of your senior year of high school, your last year of high school, you vote on people in the class who have, who is the most athletic or who is the most likely to succeed or who is the smartest or something. I don't remember exactly what they were, but they're basically, you're awarding people these little categories. And so anyway, I did the same with Kim's categories that she created and matched them up with these countries that I've been to over the last 12 months. I'll give you a little brief background on each one. So, category 1 was most diverse. I took this I wasn't sure if this meant in terms of like, landscapes and natural beauty and just like, that sort of diversity, or if it meant in terms of like, people. And so anyway, in either case, I decided that France was the answer here. If you think about France from like a natural standpoint, it has the Mediterranean coastline in the south with like the French Riviera and beautiful like cliffs dropping down into the, turquoise green waters of the Mediterranean. It's got islands in that area. You've got the North Coast, which looks more like Britain or Ireland. You've got wine country over near Bordeaux. You've got the French Alps. And then of course you've got major cities like Paris. And the diversity that you find there is so incredible to me. Like you could just spend so much time just traveling around France and experiencing so many different things. Down in French Catalonia, you feel like a little bit more like you're in Spain. It borders several countries to the north and to the east. It's just got so much Atlantic coast, North coast, Mediterranean coast. I'm just fascinated. And then you throw in, some of the beauty that you find in the north, in the Alps, and it's like, man, this is all in one country and all relatively close to each other. But also when you get into the cities, you see it's so diverse. That was one of the first things that really caught me off guard when I left Spain for the first time and went back to France. Spain feels very Spanish. And of course, this is a little bit different if you're in like Barcelona or Madrid. But really like everywhere else, I feel like it feels very, very Spanish. And in some ways like homogenous in that way. But that's not the case in France. I feel like wherever you go in France, you see that people are from a lot of different places around the world, and it's got a little bit more diversity in that regard. Of course, we're painting some broad strokes here, but for those reasons, I went with France as the most diverse. The most affordable, I went with Albania. I was in Albania last summer and was just amazed at how relatively inexpensive it was, particularly when you're away from the South Coast where it's becoming a bit more touristy, but Albania is still a real haven. If you're on a budget, I think you can go have a fantastic time in Europe and really enjoy the lower cost of living there. Nicest people, I was torn here. So I tried to think, I went with a tie. So I thought about nicest people in two different ways. One, there's like hospitality, like when you're at a restaurant, or, the service that you get when you're in a place, and the way people go out of their way for you. And then there's just like the gift of the gab, and the, friendly people that are going to, you just sit down and make friends with easily. And for me, the two places that hit home with were Ireland. I cannot help but be so attracted to the Irish people. They're so friendly. They're always happy, always having a good time. I love when I get to spend some time in Ireland. And then Greece. I was in Greece last summer as well. And I was just blown away by the level of hospitality, the way people went out of their way to make sure that you were safe and comfortable. Super, super friendly people. And so I couldn't make a distinction between those two sorts of niceness. So I went with Ireland and Greece in a tie. Most underrated, I went with Austria. Austria is insanely beautiful. It sits right next to Switzerland. And I think it's kind of in Switzerland's shadow a little bit in terms of like the Alps and natural beauty and things like that. But it's right there with it. And it just falls a little bit off the radar for some reason. You also have Vienna, which, for example, is like always voted as one of the best cities in the world to live in. And I think that flies under a lot of people's radar. So for me, Austria has everything. It's a wonderful country, super nice people, beautiful landscapes, great cities, centrally located in Europe. You can see so much, but at the same time, like, I don't think it's up there at the top of people's bucket list to go visit. And so for that reason, I'm going to call it underrated. Best natural beauty, though, kind of going to put my foot in my mouth a little bit on that last one, because I do think Switzerland still holds the most natural beauty, like the best natural beauty. I mean, the Swiss Alps are just insane, and like everybody should try to witness them. The landscapes that you get there, the way that they protected everything, the lakes, the picture perfect little towns. I mean, everything is just like works like clockwork, and it's just incredibly beautiful. So they've protected it in a way that almost sometimes just a little I guess a little jab at Switzerland along with this is it almost feels a little bit like too perfect and too beautiful sometimes, because you can't touch it. It's a little bit pristine. There's, they keep you can't just like go running rugged up into the mountains in a lot of places. But if you can get there and just witness it and experience it, you're going to have a fantastic time, and you're going to see some of the most beautiful places you've ever seen. So she said one here, hidden gem or off the beaten path. So I went with two. I separated these two things. So I think this is going to sound super weird, but I think Germany's a little bit of a hidden gem, just because, kind of like Austria, I don't think it's like up there as the place where a lot of people think to go to first. I think, maybe if you're planning your first trip to Europe, you're thinking Italy or something like that. But Germany is a bit of a hidden gem in that it has so much to offer, and it is such a cool country to travel in and visit. So I think it's a little bit of a hidden gem. It's weird to say because it's the most populous country in Europe. It's the biggest economy in Europe. It's got one of the busiest airports in the world. And it's no stranger to tourism and foreigners. But at the same time, I think if you started going down the list of like where people want to go visit when they're traveling around the world, I don't know where Germany pops up in that. I think it's a little bit further down the list, and I think it should be higher. But off the beaten path, I think, is Montenegro. Montenegro is really tough to get to in a lot of ways, especially compared to some of its neighbors and other European countries. But it is well worth it if you can get there. Personally, I drove all the way down the Adriatic coast there and eventually made it to Montenegro. It was a hellacious drive. I'm not going to lie. It was not the easiest drive I've ever done in the world. At one point, there was literally a sign in somebody's yard that was just like a stake of wood with a cardboard sign written on it, says "To Montenegro," like arrow to the left. And so anyway, and it just, it took a long time. It was windy roads. But when you get there, I mean, once you get off that beaten path, it is well worth it. There's some beautiful coastline, incredibly cool cities like Kotor and others. So well worth the trip if you can make it. All right. Moving through the last few here pretty quickly. Most efficient. I'm going with Netherlands. If you want a place where you just want to go and move to and make your life simple, go to the Netherlands. Things just work. Most vibrant culture, Spain. Spain knows how to have a good time. There's always something going on there. Living in Spain for 5 years, it was just like incredible. There's never a day where I didn't have something to do, some kind of event, some kind of gathering. People stay up late. They're always about, socializing, and the more the merrier and things like that. So the culture in Spain is unbeaten in that regard. Best quality of life overall, or best quality of life, I'm going to go with Portugal. I think for affordability, weather, the cost of living, the food, the atmosphere, the friendliness. I think you get a little bit of it all in Portugal. So I would go with best quality of life there. And then finally, best all around, I am going with Italy. Just when I think about Italy, I think, you get a little bit of, really do get a little bit of everything. Some of the best food in the world, from a nature and, natural beauty standpoint. You've got the Alps and the Dolomites up in the north. You've got islands like Sicily and Sardinia off the coast. You got countless miles of coastline, history that is just unrivaled in terms of all the, what you have there in Rome and, all throughout Italy, and the places like Pompeii and such. You're well taken care of. Awesome hospitality. It's still somewhat affordable, especially if you get out of places like Florence, Venice, Milan, Rome, and get into some of the other places around the country that are still not completely overrun with tourists. But yeah, just in terms of its central location, the architecture, the history, the food, the quality of life, I think you've got a little Mediterranean vibe mixed with the Central European vibe that just really makes it a wonderful place to call home. So best all around is Italy. Great question. Thank you so much for that one, Kim. I hope that was fun for the audience as well. All right, moving on to the next question. I want to move abroad, but I'm not a digital nomad with a remote work type of job. Do I have any other options, and where should I look into this? So this is from Sven, sending good vibes from Sweden. Thanks for the good vibes, Sven. Yeah, this is a great question. I think this is something that a lot of people feel. They hear about digital nomad visas and they think, I'm not a digital nomad, so I'm out of luck, right? But look, I wasn't a digital nomad either. I don't even know if I consider myself one now. The truth is that there's a lot of options for you, and it's just about figuring out your lifestyle and how they match up with any given country. So just as an example, I talked earlier about the non-lucrative visa. A lot of countries have a visa like this. So you may not be a traveling digital nomad, but do you have some sort of income or some sort of savings which can support you and allow you to go live in that country without taking a job from a local? There is, for example, we had the team from Lexity on the show that talked about the French visitor's visa, for example. That was an episode that was really well received, because that's a visa where you don't necessarily have to have a job. You just need to be able to support yourself, and you can go live in France for a year. And while you're there in France, you can find a job, and then you can figure it out from there. And so there are lots of options like that. There's also, for example, the Greek digital nomad visa. Even if you're not a digital nomad where you're working and bringing in, a revenue from your work every week or month, you can go there just with a bit of your savings and show that, hey, I'm able to support myself. I have, some savings in my account. I can tap into these funds if I need to. Can I just stay for a year? And just by applying, you're granted a residency permit or you're granted the ability to stay during the time that they're processing your application, which may be many, many months. So that's what I want to tell you, Sven, and others who are like, okay, I'm not a digital nomad. What are my options? There are tons of options for you out there. I think it's really about figuring out where you want to go and what you want to do during this time. How long do you want to be abroad? Are you trying to work towards long-term citizenship or residency? Is this just a gap year, where you want to spend a year in a different place? So it really starts there, figure out what you want to do. And then I can almost guarantee you, if you have a region in mind, you can probably figure it out. The other thing is that you might not necessarily even need a specific visa to go do what you want to do. Like Sven, in your case, you're from Sweden. You can literally go move around the EU as much as you want. You won't have any problems. But if you want to go to other countries, for example, there's a lot of Americans right now going to Argentina. Argentina doesn't really have a digital nomad visa yet, but they're also not like you can go and pretty much stay as long as you want. Don't quote me on that. Do your own research. But generally speaking, I know a lot of Americans who are going and just figuring out how to stay as long as they want. People that I know that live in Costa Rica, for example, they just do border hops and leave. All they have to do is every 6 months leave Costa Rica and then come back. So they'll leave for a day and then come back. You can just hop over the border to Panama or something like that. People in Bali do the same thing. So you'll notice, whenever you talk about these things, I'll get some emails or comments after this saying, that's not 100% correct, or there's this law that says this or that. I'm just saying in practice, this is what a lot of people are doing. You do have to do your research and figure out exactly what you want and where you want to be. But that's the real reality of it, is that you don't have to be a digital nomad you don't have to be a laptop toting digital nomad that's got a remote job that lets them work from anywhere to fit the criteria of a digital nomad visa. In fact, most of the visas out there would be structured that way. It's more about, can you support yourself somehow and get your foot in the door with the country. So you've got lots of options, Sven. Thank you for the question. Next question. I've been following your travels on Instagram the last couple of years, and in regular IG fashion, all I see are the highlights. Fair enough. You're also pretty positive about each of the places you've been here on the podcast. So I wonder if you can say something negative about some of your favorite countries. I'll propose Italy, Spain, and Croatia, but feel free to add others. Come on, humor me and try to be an a-hole. Thanks, Michelle. Michelle's currently traveling in Southeast Asia. So thanks for the question, Michelle. You gave me a challenge. I am up to the challenge. You're right. I do enjoy traveling. So sometimes it's pretty easy just to dip into the positive, but of course there are negatives everywhere. So yeah, let's hit some of those. So you mentioned Italy, Spain, and Croatia. I'll just go in that order. Italy, bureaucracy sucks in Italy. It is horrible. I looked into the process of moving there, and it is extremely challenging compared to other countries. It's overcomable. It's doable. I just didn't have the headspace for it. Things were slow. I got questions answered that were constantly changing. And finally I had to reach out to my partners over at Lexity and just be like, hey, can you guys tell me, can you guys answer some of these questions for me? Because when I'm talking to the government, I'm getting things totally wrong. And at that point I was just exploring it, what would this look like? And it was painful. So, 100% like the bureaucracy in Italy. If you're going to move to a country in Europe, and you're planning on, leveraging some kind of assistance to help you do that. If of all the countries, I would say Italy is the one you probably want to definitely make sure you hire some help for. That's what I'll say. So anyway, and I've done this process in Spain many times. People will say Spain's system is archaic. I'm here in Germany right now. People will say Germany's systems are archaic. I've looked into it all. Italy's their bureaucracy is heavy. And so anyway, just keep that in mind. With Spain, that coming up to your next question here, or the next country on your list, Spain is really hard to get stuff done. Everything is mañana, mañana, mañana. You ask somebody you ask a plumber to come and they say, okay, they'll be there on Friday at 2 p.m. It might be Thursday at 2 p.m. or Monday at 7 a.m. or, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but time is not really as factored in Spain, and it can be extremely frustrating. I've really struggled to deal with that a lot of times. For them, they're like, hey, it's, relax, man. I said 2, I'm here at 4, no big deal. And I'm like, yeah, I've been waiting for 2 hours and trying to call you and you didn't show up. And so anyway, that I think that is a real thing that can seem easy to get by. Okay, yeah, I'll just deal with it. No big deal. No, but it can be a big deal, and it's really hard to get that out of your system. I have a positive spin I want to put on that, but so I don't upset Michelle, I won't do that. And then, okay, finally, Croatia. So Croatia, Croatia, I can't say anything positive, so I won't throw a positive caveat. It's overrun with tourists, and it's not a cheap place to go visit. People think Croatia is off the beaten path, a little hidden gem that they can still go to and find cheap Balkan prices or something. That is not the case, especially not in the hot tourist traps. I'm sure you can find some places in Croatia where that is the case, but there are a lot of tourists. I've never felt more annoyed with being in a place that was overrun with tourists than I did in Dubrovnik. And so I think, I also recall like trying to go get some beach chairs, and like the prices that they wanted for beach chairs were insane, like the most expensive I've ever seen. And so anyway, I think, Croatia was what you think it was like 10 years ago, and it has just skyrocketed up the list as a place that people want to go to. And yes, there are some spots you can go and, still find that pristine hidden gem kind of place, but it is not in the main tourist spots in Croatia now anymore either. So there you go, Michelle. I hope that was sufficient for you. It was hard for me. There are plenty of beautiful things to say about all three of those places, but I will move on for right now. That also reminds me that I didn't hit Croatia in my senior superlatives up there. I missed that one, but we ran out of categories. So Croatia is a beautiful place. I will just say that I loved it, but certainly some challenges as well. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at Lexity. I've lived abroad in various countries, and one common denominator I've found is that dealing with foreign bureaucracy is a nightmare. Trying to navigate visa and immigration waters in another language is not something I'd recommend ever trying on your own, even for the most experienced of us. So when I recently had to renew my Spanish visa again, I turned it over to the pros at Lexity. They've already helped more than 5,000 expats and digital nomads find a home and thrive in countries like Portugal, or in my case, Spain, also Italy, France, and Greece. Some very desirable locations indeed. So whether you're trying to obtain your first visa abroad, purchase a property, or work through international tax issues, Lexity's team of friendly lawyers is here to simplify your journey. The team is super knowledgeable, bilingual, and thorough, and I seriously cannot recommend their services enough. My experience working with them has been incredible, and I can honestly say I don't know that I would have EU permanent residency if it wasn't for the help of the team at Lexity. So if you're ready to make your move abroad, then Lexity is offering an exclusive discount to About Abroad listeners. Grab 10% off your first service with the code AboutAbroad2023 and learn more over at Lexity.com in the show notes and start your abroad journey today. If you've made it this far into the episode and you're still enjoying yourself, then I would love to ask a quick favor. Open up the app that you're using to listen to this podcast and leave a quick review. You can do this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and really just about any platform that allows podcast listening now. If you can't find that in the interface of the app, then scroll down in the show notes and find ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, and you should be able to leave it from there. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. All right, next question. What are your thoughts on the future of long-term travel and life abroad for families? A lot of the stories I read are about 20-somethings with the remote jobs and backpacks, but that's not me. My husband and I are in our 40s with kids, pets, a mortgage, and jobs that keep us close to home. How do we make that transition to a life abroad because we're tired of the rat race and the cost of living here? Christian from the US. That is a really, really good question. I don't think you're alone there, Christian. I'm pretty sure that you've got a lot of people that are feeling the exact same way that you're feeling. And I'm sorry, the name is Christian. I mispronounced that. Sorry, Christian. Okay, so I think that there are a lot of people that feel exactly like you do, and there are a lot of people who really want to escape that same rat race that you feel. They're tired of the cost of living and they're also bogged down a little bit with life's obligations. So I guess first of all, I would just say misery loves company. Sometimes you're not alone for sure. I see many of these emails and messages throughout throughout my inbox all the time. So just know that, first of all. And then secondly, attached to that, I've met many people who are in your exact same situation and they've managed to escape it and they've managed to build a beautiful life for themselves in another place. So it's never been a better time than now to try to do that. You're from the US, so just speaking about Americans in particular, Americans are leaving at a higher rate than ever before and, finding home abroad. Like those are just stats and facts. So, the options are there for you. Now, what you can do to overcome that is, it depends on a lot of different factors. But I will just say we'll link to this episode in the show notes, and we probably have, if we have more, we will definitely link to them. But the one that's coming to my mind is you really need to listen to this episode from Ken Weary, who is a family man from the U.S. who left his cushy job in Seattle and has been traveling full time with his wife and 2 children ever since, homeschooling, and just like living a wonderful life, giving a great education to their kids, and very much so happy with the choice that they made. They live a lot more affordably. They have a higher quality of life. He now works remotely, but at first that wasn't the case. They were just trying to explore as much as they could and living off savings and things like that. But they did the classic, like sell the house, get rid of all the assets, downsize, and let's just go vagabond for a little while and figure it out. So there's everything between that and just simply saying hey, we are going to just downsize, we're going to move abroad, and we're going to find remote jobs. There are literally dozens of job boards out there that only focus on remote jobs. And so, for example, I'll throw one out there, JobGether, which was founded by Alex Hernandez, a guest here on the show. They do a fantastic job filtering out, jobs that are truly remote and that you can do from anywhere in the world. And so we'll link to that in the show notes as well. But I just want to encourage you, you can take those steps to do that. And I see more and more people in their 40s and 50s and 60s also doing that. So, I just keep that in mind. The options are there for you. I think it starts with figuring out what level of risk are you really willing to take, and what's your timeline look like, and where do you want to go? And then, boiling it down from there. So if you were to say what Ken did, for example, Ken left. They sold everything. I planned it out over 6 or 12 months, if I'm not mistaken. Left everything behind. Sold the house, sold the cars, gave away other things, whatever, and just said we're going to go traveling for a couple years. And they spent 3, 6, 12 months in a bunch of different places. Eventually landed in Portugal. Decided to settle down in Portugal. Got the D7 visa so they could stay in Portugal, which is relatively easy to get. And ended up building a beautiful life for themselves in Portugal. There are other people we've had on the show here who have just said directly hey, I know I want to move to Portugal, for example, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that. But I'm not sure how long I want to stay. So I'm going to keep my house here in the US. I'm going to keep renting it, or I'm going to rent it, and I'm going to go over there for a year and rent and just see if I like it. Maybe they're taking their remote job with them. Maybe they've converted their job to remote, or they've negotiated some kind of temporary change with their employer. But in any case, they've made that move for a temporary time to just kind of dip their toe in the water. And so I would recommend, figuring out your risk appetite and more or less where you want to go, honing in on that place and just going and giving it a shot. Maybe do a trial run, go for 3 months and just post up there and see what it's like. But if your fear is, okay, we've got a mortgage. Well, you can overcome a mortgage by selling your house. You've got kids. People have kids all around the world. I know it's a bit scary to think about uprooting them, but I can tell you most people I talk to that have moved their kids abroad, the kids end up having a very fulfilling and, pretty interesting experience, get to learn other languages, learn about other cultures. It's an amazing experience for them in a lot of cases. Pets, I've traveled around the world with a Siberian Husky. I promise you it's possible. And, age is just a number. So, don't let being in your 40s hold you back. If anything, now's the time to seize the moment. Right. So, anyway, I hope that was helpful for you, Christiane, and, wishing you lots of luck on that journey. All right. Next question. I heard you say you love when stereotypes are true. What are some stereotypes about the place that you're currently in that you now recognize are true or untrue after spending some time there? So that is from Liam. Liam, and you happen to be in France. All right, cool. At the moment. So Liam, thank you so much for the question. I am currently in Germany. So I'm just going to, you said the country that I'm currently in. I presume you didn't know where I was at the moment. So yeah, I'm in Germany at the moment. I've spent a good bit of time in Germany, so I feel like I have a little bit of perspective on this. So what are some things that are stereotypes that are untrue and true? First of all, I will say he's right. I do love when stereotypes are true, and nothing makes me happier when you just see something you're like, that is so stereotypically true. Yes. So with that said, let's go down. Let's figure this out. In Germany, I'll start with untrue. What are the stereotypes that people think are true, but in fact, I don't think that they are. So the first one is I can't tell you how many times I've been told Germans aren't friendly. Oh, they're not friendly. They're kind of too direct, not really like welcoming, that kind of thing. Nothing could be further from the truth. I promise you. I've had some of the most friendly encounters in all of my travels here in Europe. I'm currently in the sunny southwest of Germany, and that's not a joke. It is a very sunny area, wine region and mountains and forest and things like that. There's tons of sun, and people are bright and sunny and happy all the time here. I'm amazed sometimes. I go to a coffee shop, people just chit chat with you. They're welcoming. They speak amazing English, and they'll deal with your bad German. I've found that to be totally untrue. Of course, like anywhere, you get people who are grumpy or overly direct or whatever, and we'll address that in the true part. But there is this stereotype that people are unfriendly just because they're maybe not as open as you may be from where you are. That's the case with me. When I first came to anywhere in Europe, I was felt a little bit like people were not quite as friendly as I was used to growing up in the Southeast US. But what I've come to find out is that it's just a different way of being friendly. And I find people here are super friendly and helpful. And in fact, like a good, like kind of, litmus test for this is when I go to a gym wherever I'm moving around, staying in places for a few months at a time. And wherever I go to a gym, and usually it's like group exercise kind of thing. And the gym that I go to here, where I'm at right now in Germany, is the friendliest of all gyms I've ever been to. Every single person in there, when they walk in, they come up and greet you and say hello, give you a little fist bump, say hi, how you doing, that kind of thing. A lot of places you go, there's like no communication between people. Here, after every group exercise, people are walking around high-fiving you, telling you, having conversation, welcoming you, things like that. So that's for me, that's like a good barometer of, when I go out to eat or when I go to a place like a gym, like what are the people like when you just kind of like are trying to slip into society? I've had more people here try to give me their phone numbers, and say, hey, let's connect, let's meet up. Hey, we're doing this or that. So I think it's it's a much more friendly place than people give it credit for. The other thing that's the stereotype that's untrue is that things work really well. This is going in a little bit of a negative direction, but people think Germany's like this well-oiled machine that just functions. They're thinking back to they're the ones that invented like BMWs and Volkswagens and so much, engineering and things like that. But the truth is that things don't work as well as that you might think they do. And I'll give you some examples of this. Like people think about the Deutsche Bahn, which is like the train system here. It does not function as well as you might think. I think it functions much better in most other countries. Actually, it doesn't show up on time very often. There's constant problems with it. People joke about it all the time. Another thing is like cell phones. Like I'm in places a lot of times where like I should have great service and you don't have any service, or maybe 2G or 3G or something. Like I've never had more issues with cell phone coverage than I've had in Germany, and I've traveled to a lot of different places, and I'm particularly talking about in Europe here, but this situation in Germany is like particularly challenging compared to other places with something as simple as like phone coverage, and people talk about this. It's not like a hidden thing. Another thing was like when you're traveling around, you're not usually carrying a printer with you. So you have, a thumb drive or something that you take to a print shop when you need to get something printed, which isn't very often, but occasionally you need to do that. My wife and I have Macs, and we had something on one of our Macs that we needed to get printed. She went to the print shop and they're trying to print this thing for like 45 minutes before they realized. They said, "Oh, this must be coming from a Mac." And she was like, yeah, it's a document that was on a Mac. And they're like, "Oh, we can't print that then. We only do PCs here." And she was like, "Wait, what? I've printed stuff in a dozen different countries. I've never had somebody say that to me before." And they're like, "Yeah, sorry." And she's like, "Where can I get this printed?" The guys were like, "I don't know. Like that's you stumped me there. Of course, ultimately we ended up getting it printed, but just those kind of things where you're like, man, you think like, up with the times on top of all the tech, things work at a really high level. But the truth is I was talking with a local recently who told me like they feel like, Germany's actually falling behind. It's a big country. It's a big populated country with a huge economy. And, they are still like, they're trying to keep up, but it's a big cruise ship that you're trying to turn around. And, that can be challenging sometimes. So I see that in some of the way the thing works here. And I think that's a little bit of a stereotype that goes undiscussed. So that people think that everything works well. It's maybe not quite as much as you might think. But what's true? Okay. So, kind of going back a little bit on what I said earlier, it is true that people think the Germans are very direct. I would say that's true. People will tell you exactly how they feel, and you're gonna know where they stand. There are also a lot of rules. People are very, there are rules, and you follow the rules. And when you don't, you will hear about it directly. And so I've heard people say that stereotype, and I would 100% say it's true. And then you see like the lederhosen and that kind of stuff, like the Oktoberfesty vibe. And that is both true and untrue, because a lot of people think that when you come to Germany, you're going to see that everywhere. If you go to Berlin and talk about Oktoberfest or lederhosen or something like that, you're going to be like you look like you're from Mars. Like, why would you think that was here? That is very much so a Bavaria thing. And in Bavaria, that's really, really true. But when you're outside of Bavaria, that is not as true or even existent as you might think. So, but I do love those stereotypes. So I love that question. Thank you again, Liam. All right. Last question here. From Kate in Australia. I've been planning a move to Portugal for a few years and I'm finally ready to go, but I'm hearing there are a lot of changes to the laws and taxes for immigration. I just found your podcast, so apologies if you've covered this before, but what can you tell me about this, and is it still an option? If not, I'd also be interested in France or Spain. Is there a similar path to follow to live there? Yeah, great question. So Kate, you would not have seen this. And actually at the time we decided to answer this question for you, we hadn't confirmed the interview that we were doing with Diana from Lexity just recently. So Diana is the head of Portuguese immigration at Lexity, and we just had her on the show recently. So to talk about this exactly. So I just wanted to address it because this is one of, pretty close to one of the most, most frequently asked questions that we hear about is all about Portugal. Portugal is the number one country in the world right now for people to move abroad to. And there are a ton of questions about it because they're tinkering with their laws. So what I'm going to say is go back to that episode that's just happened in the last couple of weeks and find the update from Diana at Lexity. That will answer all your questions. The short version is, for anybody who doesn't really want to go back and do all of that, the short version is that Portugal's still open, very much so. They want you to move there, and they're trying to just tinker with the laws a little bit to make the situation better for locals, but they've already backtracked on a lot of what they originally said they were going to change. So the short version is the doors are wide open. You should go. There's nothing stopping you from continuing to do that. The longer version is in that episode that I think you should go back and listen to. And of course, reach out to Diana at Lexity if you want to go a little bit further. All right, I'm going to leave it there. This we try to keep these episodes a little bit shorter because it's just me talking, and that can't be that much fun for too long. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. I want to remind you again, we're going to take a break from recording new episodes over the summer. And so make sure to subscribe right now before we end this podcast. Go ahead and subscribe so you'll get an update when we start publishing new episodes again. And also go down to that link in the show notes to sign up for our newsletter. So you'll get an email from me when we start recording new episodes again. Thank you again for tuning in and for all the questions. If you want to send in more questions for when we come back, we'll probably kick off the next season with a Q&A episode again. So send those questions in. You can do so at chase@aboutabroad.com or through the contact form on aboutabroad.com. Either way, thank you. Hope you have a great rest of the day and appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.